The Mark Thompson Show.
It was great. I loved it.
How would you handle this? We could try ignoring it, sir.
Morning.
You cannot say you love your country.
Where are my weed smokers at?
Stay at home and get baked.
Right on, everybody. So excited to have an investigative journalist in our mix, and not just any investigative journalist, the award-winning investigative journalist at The Hollywood Reporter. Gary Baum has twice been named Journalist of the Year by the Los Angeles Press Club, and he has a novel from real life to the world based around real life. Gary's latest is In Pursuit of Beauty. How about it? A warm Mark Thompson Show welcome for the great Gary Baum, everyone.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, the fact that you're a distinguished journalist, an award-winning journalist, and investigative journalist in Hollywood, I think that speaks volumes. I'm excited to talk to you about this foray into being a novelist. The world of Hollywood is a fascinating one. It's an industry that has so much glamour, so many secrets, so much superficiality, a lot of money thrown at image, and campaigns around image. I feel in a way, and I want to talk about the book because the book has a lot of these themes in it. I feel in a way the brand management and the curation of a personal brand that used to be the world of Hollywood celebrities handled by studios, etc. I feel like that's been exported now to the world. Now we're all managing our brands sort of Hollywood style.
Yeah, something that used to be an institutional thing, used to be a top-down thing, is now been atomized. It's everyone's personal responsibility. It's something that is in everybody's hands. It's everyone's responsibility. That's something that used to be at the studio's discretion, and that's been a generational change. And it's certainly something that Hollywood itself has struggled with, as that's been democratized over the past few decades.
Yeah, in the same way that sort of entertainment has changed and the world of entertainment has taken social media and all these other things. But I have to say, one of the aspects of Hollywood and sort of the glamour scene is this world of plastic surgery, and all of that's even become sort of more accessible to the public, the world of fillers and, dermabrasion. And I mentioned this in the context of your novel because the novel is called In Pursuit of Beauty. And again, this award-winning investigative journalist with whom we're speaking has just come up with this novel. So it's based around this world that you have been an investigative journalist around, the world of Hollywood, the world of glam, etc. Yet your central character is a Beverly Hills surgeon who themselves becomes obsessed with look. And then what happens? I mean, a series of things happen that sound I haven't read the book yet. I really will read this novel. It sounds fascinating. What happens with your lead character?
Well, so my protagonist, Dr. Roy Delshad, she is a plastic surgeon in the very competitive realm of the cosmetic surgery scene in Beverly Hills. And she, through force of incident, ends up involved in a billing scheme because she wants to provide some of her lower income patients with procedures that they can't afford. And she ends up getting in trouble with both public and private insurers, and ends up in jail for a couple of years. And what ends up happening is she needs to, or feels compelled to, tell why she did it, what happened, and why she ended up in a situation where she feels that she offered what she calls beauty reparation, sort of her justification for what she did, ex post facto. She talks to a journalist turned memoir ghostwriter about what she did, and it's their sort of mind games, their charged interplay about what went down and her views on why looks really do matter from a sort of a marketplace reason. And he's
the journalist, by the way, is rakishly handsome investigative journalist. I'm wondering if you're basing this on
You
yourself
know,
in some way.
I would say that he's a composition of or a composite of people that I've known and dealt with. You know, and so is Roya. The you know, she I dealt with a lot of plastic surgeons and reporting over the years, but I've also dealt with a lot of really tough figures who had very much their own narrative, their own way of thinking about things. There was Angeline, who you mentioned at the top of this segment, but people like Heidi Fleiss or other individuals who have their own way of viewing the world that's very much different than the way others do. And they have to claim and push their way of seeing things because it's really the way that their own narrative holds their world together. And oftentimes they push you as the journalist, particularly as the investigative journalist or the narrative journalist, to kind of force the way you view things through that. And I thought that dynamic's really interesting.
It is interesting, and it's really interesting to think that it has underpinnings in the daily reporting work that you do in Hollywood as an investigative reporter. You say that you have dealt with a lot of plastic surgeons and stories, and like what kind of story brings you into that world?
Well, you know, the one in particular that really helped launch this novel's process was I was sent out, I was assigned by my editors in 2014 to look into the accidental death of a woman who was in aftercare in Beverly Hills from a facelift, and she was in the care of a very well-known and well-regarded plastic surgeon, and she had some sort of post-operative disturbance. And through that, I started talking to a lot of people in this space, and I realized that there's a lot of complexity to this particular space of elective medicine, both in terms of how these plastic surgeons deal with each other, sort of Game of Thrones quality, and to how they think about the practice. And I felt like there was more to this sort of psychological and socio-anthropological space than we've kind of seen in kind of popular art. Even, you know, there's been things like nip and tuck, but that there was more to dig into, and more to dig into than I could even get at in the resultant coverage that I've done on that story and in others. I just felt like there was places to excavate, and that's what kind of kept it with me.
It's interesting that the world of Beverly Hills plastic surgery and Hollywood glam, how that world is informed on some levels, and these sort of stories bubble to the surface occasionally, by fraud and by unlicensed physicians trying to do things. And I mean, the world that you would think pretty well regulated and with, you know, reputations around physicians being what they are and social media being what it is, you'd think it wouldn't be as common as it is. But there is a lot of fraud and a lot of fast and loose in this world of self-improvement, you know, plastic surgery.
You know, and I think that it's Hollywood and Los Angeles, it's a place built on illusion and delusion, and it's a place built on people creating their own myth. And plastic surgeons are part of the sort of superstructure of the city that helps people toward those ends, creating those narratives that allow them to be who they want to be, or dream of being, or try to reach those goals. And so it's you know, it's kind of it's a fascinating thing to explore.
In your book, the protagonist, as you said, this plastic surgeon, it seems as though they're trying to do something laudable, you know, to give back in some way, to provide for their services for free or for discounted, in other words, to people who can't afford their services. Yet the world of plastic surgery, just as a general kind of umbrella, seems like it's sort of fraught with self-indulgence and disposable income spent on, you know, beautification. You know what I mean? It's like not in itself necessarily a laudable endeavor.
I've found that when I'm reporting on all sorts of subjects, that the people involved in them, it's their lives, it's their life's work, and their narrative is that they're pursuing things that matter to them and the people that they're working with, and that they're doing a good thing. Maybe they're misunderstood. Maybe there's a profit motive behind it, but that there is meaning in it. And so that was part of getting into Roya's headspace, is that, and it might be delusional to some degree. It might not be everyone's cup of tea, but that she believes it. And it could take her to places that might not be right. But she's not the only one that could take it to this space, and it could do good, it could do bad. But there's a reason why there is a plastic surgery scene. There's a reason why it's one of the pillars of Beverly Hills. And there's a reason why there's this desire and need for these services in our modern culture, right? And there's a reason why there's an insurance market for it, right? I found that to be a fascinating part of it. Is just like, part of the novel is sort of an inquiry into the insurance market, which is not necessarily a sexy topic, but I think it's an interesting way into looking at the insurance space, which I think as a business reporter is always a fascinating way of looking at the way what we want and need out of kind of a collective society, from double indemnity forward. It's like there are so many questions and ethics around insurance.
Does the world of insurance actually include that which would be considered cosmetic surgery? In other words, is there really a policy that will cover plastic surgery?
Yeah, there are all sorts of, if you can demonstrate a medical need for certain things, for instance, even for a nose job, if you can point that you are having trouble breathing, if you're having trouble sleeping, there are all sorts of things that you can prove a medical necessity for. And there's, so many things that you think might be black and white are actually shades of gray. So it's about pushing those things. And certainly, there's a legalism to it. There's questions that if it was a matter of, if it was disputed in court, in criminal court, or certainly in civil court by a really good lawyer, if Dr. Roya Delshad had been fighting this against with a very good attorney, a Century City law firm, she might have been able to get away with it, depending on how much she wanted to pay, because there are probably ways to convince a jury that what she did, or certainly a particular kind of jury, that maybe there's at least a certain reasonable doubt.
We'll have a link to the book under this conversation, and I'm looking forward to getting into it myself. It's getting incredibly good reviews. I mean, you've just really been, it would seem, lavished with praise by your colleagues and those who have read the book, who are in the world of publishing and the world of writing. And I'm wondering, in your real life, apart from the novel, and it takes so long to come up with a novel and to come up with something apparently so good and so solid in terms of its progression and implications, et cetera, and character work. I'm wondering if, apart from that, in your investigative work, you've seen situations in Hollywood that were particularly intriguing from the standpoint, either I'm thinking, for example, right now of the Sean Combs case, where, there's an image there of a guy, he's so successful, he's so culturally entrenched, his work, his success, his money, everything. I mean, he is such a brand. And to see him brought down this way, just by the revelations around his trial, it makes me think of guys like you, who are real investigative journalists in Hollywood, around these luminaries, and we just see sort of front of the curtain stuff, right? We see what we can see from the house, but behind the curtain, there's such different figures.
I have colleagues that have been reporting on Diddy for years, or reporting on the trial now in the courtroom. And I've covered the Me Too movement. I've covered a lot of these kind of sort of high profile personality figures. And I think that, first of all, for everything that actually gets reported, there's so much that is sort of presumed to be known that doesn't make it into publication, right? Because you don't have it in such a way that it's legally backed. And I think that there's always more there. There's more people out there. There's more questions. There's more both nuance and also ideas and notions and gossip and anecdotes. There's just things are the reach and the scope and the light is much further than necessarily we can see through what's published, right? And I think that that's what kind of makes what's interesting about actually doing the work, and also frustrating about it, right? Of what you can really share officially with your readers. I know that it was very frustrating for people when Harvey Weinstein was first reported upon, and many of these figures, because people go, well, why did it take so long? A lot of these things seem like open secrets afterwards. We'll say everyone knew about Sean Combs. Everyone knew about, insert name here within a certain community. And, it's true. People did, quote unquote, know, but it's very hard to go from everyone knowing about something within a certain space to moving it to a place where it's kind of a reported, quote unquote, fact. And so even now, there are so many things that people are trying to get on the record. And will they? Well, we'll find out in tomorrow or next month or next year's paper. But that was true for decades with Harvey Weinstein. We all were trying to get the Harvey Weinstein story until various things happened having to do with, Donald Trump's election and Roger Ailes and things moving and also Harvey Weinstein kind of becoming an eclipse figure that allowed things to settle to a point where he became a place in a culture where he could be exposed.
Yeah, that's really interesting. The last point you're making about the culture, because there was all of a sudden a sea change in the way these guys were viewed. And I think of the casting couch, which is part of Hollywood lore for decades, and it was part of Hollywood lore because it was real. And Harvey Weinstein comes up in this world, and I'm sure he's used to, using his power to get that, among other things. And as you speak also about sort of like the open secrets or the understood stuff that you're looking to find corroborative material, or, those who will actually go on the record to support such things. I think of Bill Cosby, and Bill Cosby for decades as well. And it felt as though the facts around the Cosby stuff, I mean, again, the corroborated facts didn't come out until, it was the comic on stage who was talking. Wasn't that it? As I recall, Gary, it was, yeah.
I mean, it's oftentimes it takes things and you don't necessarily know what it might be before something pushes. And sometimes things come out and it just drops away. You go, wow, I thought that would be the moment. That happens oftentimes with investigations. Something happens, you think this is going to be it, and then nobody really cares, right? And things are swept away. Oftentimes when I've talked to crisis PR people who, sometimes they'll fight you, and sometimes they go, you know what? You got it. You got us dead to rights. They're just going to kind of roll over and just hope for the best and see how they oftentimes counsel their clients just to wait a week and then just see if people care, if they've moved on to the next thing. Because in our current climate, so much news is happening.
Yeah.
And people can kind of hope that people have moved on to whatever the next outrage.
Yeah, that Iran will bump it out of the
exactly.
media.
I had something. I had something a few months ago where the people I was writing about were just incredibly distressed, and understandably, about the things that I was about to publish. And then the LA wildfires happened a couple days afterwards, and they lucked out.
Did I talk to you or somebody else from the Hollywood Reporter about what happened with the estate of my friend Sam Simon? Was that you?
I don't know if we spoke about it, but I was the one reporting on it.
To me, it's a victim of kind of what you're talking about. I was just thinking about what you were talking about, and I thought, wow, that reminds me of Sam's situation. A brilliant, giving, dedicated, creative power in Hollywood, co-created The Simpsons, youngest showrunner in history, I think, when he was a showrunner on Cheers. And I know that he had all this money and continues to have it. All the Simpsons money, all the DVD Simpsons money, left it in a huge estate with prescribed contributions to go to Save the Children, PETA, Mercy for Animals, etc. Sea Shepherd. So he was a huge animal rights activist, as you're aware, just to let everybody know this as I'm kind of thinking about it and reflecting on it. And when he died, single guy, didn't have any other heirs. And so, long story short, he had a board, basically, the Sam Simon Foundation board, run by his bookkeeper, I guess, or someone like
that. Basically an accountant.
Right.
He really didn't know at all. It was somebody at an accounting firm.
Exactly. And that point that Gary's mentioned is so key. Didn't know him really at all. And you know this only because those things, those organizations to which he was pledged annually with huge, he was the biggest single donor to Save the Children in history. And
places like PETA, really name brand places, really depended on his contributions. He was one of the biggest givers to animal rights causes, particularly, very proactive, aggressive animal rights causes in the world.
Yes.
And they were shocked because the spigot was cut off.
Exactly. When he died, then all of that stopped. Exactly.
Yeah. And so I was reporting very aggressively on that. And what was fascinating is that the accountant, who was pocketing a lot of money from, being the board executor, then hired one of the most powerful crisis PR people in the world to defend her actions against me, rung up a big bill, and just hoped things would pass and people wouldn't care. But it's very difficult, particularly with money stories. People, when there's money stories, people have a lot of trouble, I think, with money stories. Money becomes very, unless it's a public money thing, when people think my taxes are being ripped off. If it's private money, it's all becomes abstract. And when people are being physically abused or verbally abused, it's like a Me Too thing. People can put themselves in that space, or a loved one in that space. They think my daughter, my sister, and they get upset. Where if it's actually about an animal, then they get really upset. But when it's about money, it becomes, a lot of people have trouble like doing their own taxes. So I've learned this for many years working at a business publication. It can be challenging to really get the mass populace upset about a business transgression, because people just are, it's tough to understand when people are filching behind the scenes in the private sector, like why they should be upset as a third party.
Yeah, it's honestly such a juicy story on one level, but on another level, as you suggest, it's like, meh, I don't know. Sad, rich guy, seemed like he wanted some good things in the world, was ready to put all his money to it, and I guess got ripped off. Just as a personal note, what was odd, and because we all knew Sam was dying and we all were around him, and I was around him, many days out of the week with all those tubes sticking into him, and he was brilliant. Okay. I mean, obviously brilliant. I mean, but not just brilliantly funny. He went to Stanford, top of his class, just truly brilliant. So you don't expect that somebody so brilliant would ever be ripped off that way. Like, you're going to die. We all know you're going to die. There's a documentary film being made about your final months. Surely you have made certain that these monies will be, in a lockbox dedicated to all of these charities.
I will say PSA, make sure, particularly if you have a decent amount of wealth, that you have a pretty detailed estate plan set up, and that you have a number of executors and not just one person, and that you know that person and you think that they're going to fulfill it. Because if it's just one person, if it's just somebody that's, H&R Block level, they have no compunction about just kind of taking their annual take and just letting things roll.
Yeah, and boy, in this case, just enriching their friends, it would seem, and it's a sad, sad thing for a guy who had so much good. And I just scratched the surface on his contributions. Gary, what he did. He had food banks, mobile food banks, going through neighborhoods, feeding people. I mean, my God, it was the best. It's one of those rich people you root for. He was like Bruce Wayne and Batman, but
yeah, he didn't have any heirs. He just he was just going to be giving it all away.
Yeah.
So
anyway, but it just occurred to me as we were talking about those things that, were going on in all your investigative work. I congratulate you on this book, and thank you for indulging me with the discussion of Sam too. And I'm really gratified to know that at least you were the guy on it, because you're the real thing. In Pursuit of Beauty, Gary Baum's latest, and it is on New York Post's Best Beach Reads of 2025. Come on. That's what I'm talking about. You really have gotten so many great reviews for this. I'll read you one of them. What a debut. So complete and clear is Baum's understanding of the journalistic mind, its strategies, paranoias, and empathies. In Pursuit of Beauty could just as accurately be called In Pursuit of the Story. And that's one hell of a pursuit. For as Baum puts it perfectly, journalism's a rude business, even in its finest hours when it's slaying dragons. Wow. That's from another best-selling author, Sam Wasson. So what can I say but congratulations? Seems like you've come in with a big splash. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. It's been a great job.
Yeah, I've loved our conversation. There'll be a link to Gary's book under this video, and I look forward to more. Maybe we'll talk about Hollywood as the world of Hollywood sadly goes away. Yeah, I have so many friends who are, at the epicenter of the business, and we all know the community of Los Angeles is so dependent on that industry, and it's scary to see what's happening in Hollywood now. It's the unraveling of a business, Yeah. So we'll talk again. Gary, thanks. Good luck.
Thank you.
Gary Baum, everybody.